I want you to imagine just for a second a Venn diagram.
Okay.
And on one side of this diagram, you have ancient Hindu prophecies, like 5,000-year-old cosmic cycles.
Right.
And then on the other side, you have Elon Musk, Bollywood action movies, and like the hyper-pragmatic, cutthroat world of Washington, D.C. lobbying.
It sounds like an impossible combination.
It really does. But today, we are taking a deep dive into the exact center of that Venn diagram.
Yeah, we really are.
Because back in 2008, there was this political organizer pounding the pavement in New York City. He actually notes he was Barack Obama's very first full-time volunteer in the city.
Which means he was steeped in, the most data-driven, grounded, modern political campaigning you can get.
Exactly. But fast forward to today, and that same guy is writing these incredibly dense, massive manifestos claiming that Elon Musk is basically fulfilling ancient theology by building humanoid robots.
It's a staggering trajectory, honestly.
Totally. So the author operates under the blog name Barackface, but his real name is Paramendra Kumar Bhagat. And our mission today is to essentially map out his worldview. Because it is, well, it's a lot.
It's massive.
Yeah, bends time and space, outlines this global holy war, and then somehow, incredibly, lands on this granular advice for how the Indian American diaspora needs to build institutional power in D.C.
Right. And before we really step into the weeds on this, I think we need to set some ground rules for you, the listener, as we go through this analysis today.
Yeah, that's important.
Because we are stepping into a bit of a rhetorical minefield here. These sources contain some deeply polarized, highly charged religious and political viewpoints.
Very charged.
Yeah. The author makes sweeping, aggressive claims about Islam, the state of Israel, foreign policy, and, the literal incarnation of God on earth.
Right.
So we need to be clear. Our goal here today is not to endorse or validate or even debate the morality of these views.
No, not at all.
We're keeping our analytical hats firmly on. We are acting strictly as your impartial guides. We just want to unpack the structural engineering of these arguments so you can see how this wildly unique and frankly often controversial perspective is actually built.
So basically, we aren't here to judge the theology. We're just here to understand the blueprint.
Exactly.
So let's start with the foundation of that blueprint.
Yeah.
Because the theological claim he opens with is just massive.
It really sets the stage for everything else.
He argues that the Messiah, the one that Jews, Christians, Hindus, and Buddhists have all been waiting for throughout their entire histories, is the exact same entity.
Yes. He literally asserts that Yahweh from the Judeo-Christian tradition and Vishnu from the Hindu tradition are the exact same divine consciousness.
Wow.
And, taking it a step further, he claims that this entity is currently on Earth, right now, in a human incarnation.
Okay, so to even begin to wrap my head around how he gets to that conclusion, I feel like we have to completely throw out the way we normally think about time, right?
You do. You have to abandon the Western linear concept of time completely.
And by linear, I mean the idea that history is just a straight line. Point A is the Big Bang, or the creation of the universe, and point B is the apocalypse, the end of the world.
Right, precisely. In the West, time has a start and a catastrophic finish, but the author throws that model in the trash. He replaces it with a cyclical view of time.
Drawn from Hindu cosmology.
Exactly. So in this worldview, time operates in these vast epochs, they're called yugas, and they repeat in an endless cycle. It's much more like, say, the seasons of a year.
Okay, so for the listener, instead of picturing a timeline on a whiteboard, picture a cosmic clock.
A cosmic clock is the perfect analogy, and according to his timeline, this single divine entity, this consciousness, has stepped onto the stage of human history at very specific intervals on this clock.
Like clockwork, basically.
Yeah. He points out that Vishnu was on Earth as Lord Krishna roughly 5,000 years ago, which was an era documented in the Mahabharata. Then, if you go further back on the clock, he was Lord Rama about 7,000 years ago, which is in the Ramayana, and then he was Lord Buddha 2,500 years ago.
So it's not like a pantheon of different gods all competing for attention.
No, not at all.
He's saying it's one overarching consciousness that just puts on a different suit, adopts a different name, and intervenes whenever the cosmic season requires a change.
That is exactly what he's arguing. And the season we are currently in, or I should say the season we are the very tail end of right now, is what Hinduism calls the Kali Yuga.
Right. Let's pause there for a second, because you hear terms like Kali Yuga thrown around a lot in pop culture or like on internet forums, usually just meaning things are bad right now.
Yeah, it gets misused a lot.
What does it actually mean in the context of this author's framework?
Well, in Hindu cosmology, the Kali Yuga is the final, darkest age in this cycle of 4 yugas. It's characterized by spiritual degradation, widespread deceit, massive conflict, and basically a total collapse of human morality.
It's the cosmic winter.
It's the dead of winter. And this is a crucial foundational point for his whole argument because it radically recontextualizes what the Judeo-Christian tradition calls the end times.
Right, because when someone in America hears end times, they picture, fire raining from the sky, the planet exploding.
Judgment Day, the literal destruction of Earth.
Yeah.
But the author argues that when the Bible talks about the end times, it's actually suffering from a conceptual translation error.
Really? How so?
He claims it simply refers to the end of this specific age, the end of the Kali Yuga.
Oh, I see.
It's just the end of winter. And, I mean, the Earth doesn't explode when winter ends, right?
Right, the ice just melts.
The ice melts and you transition into spring. So he's arguing that we are at the tail end of this massive cosmic winter, and the Messiah is currently walking the Earth to literally turn the page to a new age.
But the thing is, he doesn't just ask the reader to take all this cosmic history on faith, does he?
No, he is highly analytical about it.
Because what really struck me is that he has this incredibly rigid, almost mechanical definition of what actually makes a text sacred. He doesn't care about, nice moral platitudes.
Not at all.
He claims a text is only legitimate scripture if it contains prophecy.
Yes.
Why is prophecy the absolute litmus test for him?
It all comes down to his mathematical definition of what God actually is. For him, God has to be omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent.
The classic definitions.
Right. But if a being is truly omnipresent, that means they exist outside the constraints of linear time.
They aren't bound by past, present, and future.
Exactly. They can see all of it simultaneously. Therefore, the only tangible, provable way a being outside of time can prove they exist to human beings who are totally trapped inside time is by accurately predicting the future.
Oh, that makes sense. So prophecy isn't just like a magic parlor trick to him.
No, it's the ultimate footprint.
It's the undeniable footprint of a being operating in a higher dimension.
Exactly. He cites the Bible, the Kalki Purana, and the Bhavishya Purana as legitimate scripture strictly because they meet this predictive threshold.
Because if a text just tells you how to be a good neighbor, that's philosophy.
Yeah, that's just good advice. But if a text predicts a specific event centuries before it happens, that is divine architecture.
And he uses this really visceral example from the Bible to illustrate how that mechanism works.
He does.
He points to the prophecy that the Messiah would be crucified, but with not one bone broken.
Yes, that's from the Book of Psalms, which was written centuries before the life of Jesus.
And the author emphasizes that when that prophecy was actually written, crucifixion wasn't even a recognized method of execution. The Romans hadn't popularized it yet.
Right.
Furthermore, he points out that the standard Roman practice during a crucifixion was to shatter the legs of the victim to speed up asphyxiation.
It was a brutal, standard operating procedure.
But according to the biblical account, Jesus died before his legs could be broken, fulfilling this hyper-specific, seemingly impossible set of conditions that were predicted centuries prior.
And to the author, that is not a historical coincidence. That is a mathematical proof.
Because it demonstrates a level of systemic control over human history that no human being could engineer.
Right. You couldn't even have a massive human conspiracy coordinate that across centuries. It requires an outside force.
And he also uses this concept of divine mathematics to look backward, not just forward. There's this incredible anecdote he brings up about something called the Natya Shastra.
Oh, yes. That's a fascinating part of his argument.
Can you explain what that text actually is and what he claims modern technology revealed about it?
Sure. So the Natya Shastra is this ancient Indian treatise on the performing arts. It covers theater, dance, music. It's roughly 2,000 years old.
Okay.
And the text contains exhaustively detailed instructions on choreography. It outlines exactly how a dancer should move their limbs, their hands, their head, down to the smallest detail.
So it's essentially a 2,000-year-old instruction manual for classical Indian dance.
Exactly. Now, the author claims that when researchers used modern motion capture technology...
Wait, like the kind they use for video games and CGI in movies?
Yes, exactly like that, where they put those little tracking dots on a person's joints and record their movements into a computer.
Okay, I'm with you.
So he says they took a classically trained dancer, put them in a motion capture suit, and had them perform the routines exactly as they are prescribed in the Natya Shastra.
And what happened?
He claims they made a stunning discovery. The software plotting the trajectory of the dancer's joints tracked exactly 108 perfect circles, triangles, and curves in three-dimensional space.
That is wild. I mean, how does motion capture software translate a dance into pure geometry?
Well, if you imagine a light attached to the dancer's wrist,
Yeah.
and you take a long exposure photograph in a dark room, you'd see the glowing trail of the movement, right?
Right, like drawing with a sparkler.
Exactly. The computer's doing that mathematically. It's calculating the X, Y, and Z coordinates of every joint over time.
Wow.
And the author's point is that human beings living 2,000 years ago did not have three-dimensional graphing software.
Definitely not.
They could not have intuitively designed choreography that secretly maps out exactly 108 mathematically perfect geometric shapes.
The implication being that the mathematics were embedded into the art by a divine source.
Yes.
It's like finding computer code written into a stone tablet.
Precisely. He is using these examples to build mechanical argument for God's existence.
Yeah.
He's trying to establish that divine intervention is a structural reality of our universe, proved by prophecy and hidden math.
Okay, so if we accept his premise of the cosmic clock, and we accept his premise that a divine intelligence is actively maneuvering human history to transition us out of this dark age,
Right.
how is that work actually being done today? Because he's not talking about, like, parting the Red Sea. He's not talking about a booming voice coming out of the clouds.
No, he isn't. And this is where his worldview takes a really sharp, deeply surreal turn into modern pop culture and Silicon Valley.
It's a huge pivot.
It is. The author believes that the divine plan is primarily executed through what he calls unwitting agents.
Unwitting agents. Define that for me.
It means that God uses human beings to build the infrastructure of the new age, without those human beings having any idea that they are participating in a divine plan.
So they don't know they're working for God.
They have no clue. They think they're just living their lives, pursuing their careers, or making art.
Wow.
They do not hear a voice, they do not get a vision, but their actions are being subtly coordinated from outside of time.
And the first major example he gives for this is the blockbuster Bollywood movie industry,
Yes.
specifically the megastar Shah Rukh Khan.
Right. The author claims that the divine consciousness specifically highlighted the 2023 Bollywood action movie called Jawan.
Jawan.
Yes, which was directed by Atlee and stars Shah Rukh Khan. He highlights it as a Kalki movie.
And Kalki is the prophesied final avatar of Vishnu who ends the Kali Yuga.
Exactly. The author is asserting that the narrative of this specific modern action movie actually contains the prophetic blueprint for how the divine work of ending the age will practically unfold in the real world.
I am just trying to wrap my head around the logistics of this, because a modern movie production involves thousands of people.
Absolutely.
You have screenwriters, producers, directors, actors, editors. It's this massive, chaotic corporate enterprise.
Yeah.
The author is suggesting that a divine entity somehow hijacked that entire logistical pipeline to broadcast a coded message.
Yes, and that is the defining characteristic of the unwitting agent. The author explicitly states that Shah Rukh Khan does not know he is part of a prophecy.
Right.
The director, Atlee, does not know. They thought they were just making a highly profitable, highly entertaining popcorn movie.
They were just making art and making money.
Exactly. They were making artistic and commercial decisions based on their own human instincts. But the author believes those instincts were being guided by a hidden hand, resulting in a movie that secretly serves as a prophetic text.
That is just a fascinating way to look at art. But the author takes this concept of the unwitting agent and scales it up to a level that I honestly struggled to digest.
He really goes big with it.
He applies it to Elon Musk.
He views Elon Musk as perhaps the most crucial unwitting agent on the entire planet right now.
Okay, I have to push back on this on behalf of anyone listening who follows the tech industry even a little bit.
Go for it.
You are telling me that the richest man in the world, the guy who sells flamethrowers, builds electric cars, buys social media platforms, and talks about colonizing Mars, is secretly dismantling the global order on behalf of an ancient Hindu prophecy.
That is exactly what he's saying.
That feels incredibly convenient. Like, it sounds like Silicon Valley techno-optimism just being rebranded as theology.
Yeah.
How does the author possibly justify tying Elon Musk to the Kalki Purana?
It is an extreme recontextualization, I'll give you that. But if you follow the internal logic of the author's framework, you can see the mechanical connection he is making.
Walk me through it.
The author states that according to the ancient texts, The transition out of the Kali Yuga requires the establishment of an age of abundance and a moneyless economy.
A moneyless economy, meaning currency itself ceases to exist.
Correct. No more money. Now look at what Elon Musk has been saying publicly, entirely independent of any religious context.
Okay.
In various interviews, particularly when he's talking about his development of AI and the Optimus humanoid robot,
Right.
Musk has stated that long-term currency will end.
Because AI and robotics will theoretically drive the cost of labor and production down to practically zero?
Exactly. Musk has argued that in the future, there will be no money, because AI and automation will create such an overwhelming abundance of goods and services that the whole concept of trading currency for survival just becomes obsolete.
You'll simply have whatever you need. Okay, I see the parallel he's drawing there. The ancient text predicts an age of abundance with no money.
Yeah.
And Elon Musk is actively building the technology that he believes will create an age of abundance with no money.
But the crucial piece of evidence for the author is Musk's attitude toward this future.
What do you mean?
Musk has famously said regarding this AI-driven future something to the effect of, "I am not saying this is important work and I will do it. I am saying this will happen with or without me."
Oh, he views it as just an inevitable technological trajectory.
Right. He thinks it's just math and engineering taking its natural course.
It's just evolution.
To the author, that exact lack of spiritual awareness is the ultimate proof that Musk is an unwitting agent.
Wow.
Musk thinks he's just following the logical trajectory of silicon and code. He probably views himself as an atheist or at least a strict rationalist.
Yeah, materialist.
But the author argues that Musk is quite literally doing God's heavy lifting.
He's the contractor building the house.
Exactly. He is building the physical infrastructure, the AI, the robots, the energy systems required to make the ancient prophecy of a moneyless economy a physical reality. He is acting out a script he has never read.
Okay, I see the internal logic now. I mean, even if you don't buy the premise, the architecture of the argument is incredibly tight.
It's very consistent.
He takes the ultimate symbol of hyper-capitalist disruption and frames him as a pawn on a cosmic chessboard.
It is a profound synthesis of ancient mysticism and modern technofuturism.
But the author doesn't believe this transition is just going to be, a smooth ride into a robotic utopia where nobody has to work anymore.
No, not at all.
If we're ending the Kali Yuga, the cosmic winter, the author believes the transition requires navigating a deeply dark, incredibly violent reality first.
Yes. And this is where we really have to navigate the author's deeply controversial apocalyptic views on Islam.
Right.
And again, just to remind you, the listener, we are analyzing the structure of his perspective here. We're not endorsing or validating these claims.
Absolutely.
The author asserts a highly aggressive theological stance. He calls Islam the anti-religion, and he goes so far as to label it the religion of the devil.
That is a startlingly aggressive posture.
Very much so.
How does he justify that philosophically? Because up to this point, he doesn't seem like someone who just throws out insults. He always tries to tie it back to his mathematical definitions.
And he does exactly that here. He ties it directly back to his definition of omnipotence and prophecy.
Okay.
His central theological argument against Islam is that Allah, as described in the Quran, lacks the omnipotence that characterizes true divinity.
And how does he arrive at the conclusion that Allah lacks omnipotence?
Because of two factors. First, he also believes a true God must be capable of physical incarnation.
Meaning stepping into human history in a physical body, like he claims Vishnu and Yahweh have done?
Yes. He asserts Allah does not do this.
Okay, what's the second factor?
Second, and this is more important to his framework, he claims there are no verifiable prophecies attributed to the Prophet Muhammad.
Going back to the prophecy rule.
Exactly. The author actually has a mantra for this. He says, runners run, swimmers swim, prophets prophesy.
Wow. So if a being cannot predict the future, it cannot prove it exists outside of linear time.
Right.
Therefore, in the author's strict mechanical definition, it cannot be God.
Exactly. Because he sees no mechanism of prophecy there, he concludes there is no divine connection.
He's very rigid about it.
He even goes to the historical extreme of claiming there is no historic Muhammad.
Yeah.
He views the origins of the religion as a systemic distortion rather than a divine revelation.
It is just a complete fundamental rejection of the theology.
Total rejection.
But how does this religious critique fit into his broader cyclical theory of the ages, because he doesn't just leave it at theology. He ties it directly to the physical end of the Kali Yuga.
He does. He ties it directly to the concept of an inevitable cataclysmic final war.
A war.
Yes. And to understand why he believes this war is necessary, we have to look back at the historical precedents he relies on, specifically the Hindu epics, Mahabharata and the Ramayana.
So the eras of Krishna and Rama.
Yes. Both of those eras, both of those previous yugas, ended in massive world-altering conflicts.
Okay.
In the Mahabharata, it's the Kurukshetra War.
Walk me through the context of that war, because it seems really vital to understanding his modern political views.
It is. The Kurukshetra War was technically a dynastic struggle over a throne, but on a cosmic level, it was a war of total annihilation to cleanse the earth of corrupt, tyrannical rulers, a faction known as the Kauravas.
Right.
The crucial lesson the author extracts from this epic is his definition of the nature of evil.
Which is?
In the text, the forces of good try repeatedly to negotiate. They ask for just 5 villages to avoid bloodshed. Just give us 5 villages and we won't fight.
They just want to compromise.
But the tyrannical side refuses to yield even a needle's worth of territory.
They are completely intractable.
Exactly. And the author's takeaway from that is that the truly evil do not reason.
They cannot be reasoned with.
They cannot be negotiated with, they cannot be appeased, and they will fight to the bitter end. Therefore, to clear the board and restore cosmic order, total war becomes a tragic but mathematical necessity.
So he looks at the end of the Krishna era and the end of the Rama era, sees that they both required a massive cleansing conflict, and concludes that our current age, the Kali Yuga, must end the exact same way.
He views it as a historical and cosmic inevitability.
And what is most jarring to me is how he applies this ancient cosmic template directly to modern geopolitics.
Yes.
He specifically points to the modern nation-state of Iran as the prime physical manifestation of what he calls the devil's way.
He does.
How does he define the devil's way in a political context?
He defines it as utter, uncompromising tyranny. He asks a rhetorical question about the history of the region. He says, how did Islam enter, and how does it maintain its hold?
And what's his answer?
His blunt answer is, become Muslim or die. Stay Muslim or die. He views the Iranian regime as the modern equivalent of those intractable tyrants from the Mahabharata. They cannot be reasoned with. They can only be defeated.
So in his mind, the forces of good, whoever they may be in the modern era, are heading toward a necessary, unavoidable clash with these forces.
Yes. But he claims the objective of this war is not genocide or endless suffering. He frames it as a surgical necessity.
From surgical necessity.
Yeah, he states the goal is to use overwhelming force to minimize death and destruction, while simultaneously helping the populations living under these regimes attain what he calls spiritual clarity.
It's the concept of breaking a fever.
That's a good way to put it.
Like the body has to endure a massive spike in temperature of violent biological conflict before it can heal and return to homeostasis.
That is precisely his theoretical framework. The war is the ugly, unavoidable bottleneck. You have the dark winter of the Kali Yuga on one side and the prophesied age of peace on the other side.
Which he knows is vividly described in the biblical book of Isaiah, right? An age where nations shall not learn war anymore.
Exactly. But to get from winter to spring, you have to survive the storm.
Let's just take a deep breath here.
Yeah, it's heavy.
Because listening to this, it honestly feels like we are dissecting the world building of an epic high fantasy novel.
I know exactly what you mean.
We have avatars of God, unwitting billionaire agents building robot armies, geometric codes hidden in ancient dance, and a prophesied holy war to usher in a moneyless utopia.
It is a dizzying scale.
But the author is not writing fiction. He is applying this directly to real-world modern geopolitics.
He means it literally.
And this leads me to the biggest question of all. How does a person whose brain operates on this cosmic apocalyptic frequency translate any of this into actual grounded action?
That is the big question.
If you believe the world is ending and God is pulling the strings, what do you do on a Tuesday?
That is the most fascinating paradox of this entire deep dive. Because when you turn to his second essay, the cosmic prophet completely vanishes.
Just poof, gone.
He is replaced instantly by a hyper-pragmatic, incredibly methodical political analyst operating in the windowless back rooms of Washington, D.C.
It is absolute whiplash, because he pivots from talking about the Kurukshetra War to asking a very terrestrial, granular question.
Right.
He asks, is AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, the most effective lobbying organization in the United States?
And his analysis of AIPAC is brutally realistic. It is entirely stripped of any mystical rhetoric.
How does he approach it?
Well, he acknowledges right away that if you look at pure dollar amounts, corporate lobbies crush AI PAC.
Right, like big pharma, big tech, the defense industry.
Exactly. They spend vastly more money in Washington. If lobbying success was just a crude metric of buying favorable laws, corporations would be the undisputed kings.
But he argues that buying a tax break is entirely different from securing the survival of a nation.
Exactly. He defines true political effectiveness differently than corporate lobbyists do.
How does he define it?
He defines it as bipartisan durability, cultural legitimacy, narrative dominance, elite recruitment, and the ability to consistently dictate foreign policy outcomes over the span of decades.
Regardless of who is sitting in the Oval Office.
Yes.
And by that metric, he concludes that the pro-Israel lobbying network is the absolute gold standard of influence in modern American history.
And he's quick to point out that it's not just AI PAC. It's an entire ecosystem of organizations working in tandem.
Right. He refers to it as a civilizational architecture.
A civilizational architecture.
Right.
It is not just a partial writing checks. It is a machine designed to shape reality.
He breaks down their success into what he calls the real formula. It is a 5-pillar masterclass in what he calls statecraft, rather than mere lobbying.
Let's dig into those 5 pillars.
Yeah, because this is where his analysis becomes a literal masterclass in political mechanics. What is pillar 1?
The first pillar is building an American story. The pro-Israel lobby does not frame their advocacy as a plea for charity. They don't go to a senator and say, please help Israel. They are a foreign country in need.
How do they frame it then?
They frame it as defending the West. They frame it as protecting democracy and securing America's most reliable forward outpost in a volatile region.
So they align their foreign need perfectly with America's domestic identity.
Exactly.
He writes a line that stopped me in my tracks. He says, when you successfully fuse your cause with America's self-image, you no longer feel like a lobby. You feel like patriotism.
It is a profound insight. If you convince a politician that supporting your cause is synonymous with supporting American values, you bypass their skepticism entirely.
You aren't asking for a favor.
No, you are asking America to be true to itself.
That leads to the second pillar, bipartisan durability.
Yes, a true civilizational lobby cannot afford to be tied to the fate of a single political party.
That makes sense.
If you are only allied with Republicans, you lose all your power the moment Democrats take the Senate. So the pro-Israel network cultivates permanent relevance across the aisle. They ensure that no matter who wins an election, their core interests are protected.
But it's the third pillar that I found the most revealing about how Washington actually works. He calls it elite formation. What does that mean in practice?
Elite formation is the realization that lobbying the current senator is often too late in the process.
Oh, interesting.
The pro-Israel ecosystem doesn't just lobby power, they manufacture the people who hold power.
Manufacturing decision makers, how do they do that?
They focus on the 22-year-old interns.
Wow.
Imagine a bright, ambitious college graduate arriving in D.C. The ecosystem offers them fellowships, brings them on fact-finding trips to Israel, mentors them, and helps place them in key staff positions.
Right.
Fast forward 10 years, that 22-year-old is now a chief of staff drafting legislation. Fast forward 20 years, they might be the senator themselves, or a key journalist, or the head of the think tank.
So they are seeding the entire intellectual landscape.
Exactly. The author points out that they fund Ivy League chairs, policy analysts, and media fellows.
They are creating the water that Washington swims in.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Because if the staffer writing the memo, the think tank scholar validating the memo, and the journalist reporting on the memo all came up through your ecosystem, you don't need to lobby the senator.
No, the environment makes the decision for them.
That is why he calls it statecraft.
Yeah.
The fourth pillar is mastering moral language.
This is where narrative dominance comes in. They utilize the profound emotional weight of Holocaust memory, the narrative of historical survival, the solemn vow of never again.
The author drops another incredible axiom here. He says, politics is downstream of emotion, and emotion is downstream of myth.
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
If you can tap into a deeply held cultural myth, a story about good, evil, survival, and destiny, you bypass logical debate entirely.
You're operating on a different level.
They give their cause a moral urgency that feels sacred. When a politician votes on a pro-Israel measure, the lobby ensures it doesn't feel like a vote on a mundane budget allocation.
Right. It feels like a vote on the fundamental survival of a persecuted people.
Exactly.
And finally, the fifth pillar, weaponized participation.
Because the best narrating in the world means absolutely nothing if politicians don't fear losing their jobs.
True.
The pro-Israel network ensures their community is politically literate and highly organized. They don't just donate money. They mobilize voters strategically in primary elections.
So they make it very clear that there are consequences.
They make it definitively clear to politicians that there is a measurable, career-ending cost to opposing them and a massive reward for supporting them.
So he breaks down this incredibly efficient, ruthlessly disciplined Jewish and Israeli lobbying machine. But he isn't dissecting AIPAC just to praise them, is he?
No, he has a very specific goal.
He is taking this perfectly engineered blueprint and holding it up as a mirror and basically a weapon for his own community, the Indian-American diaspora.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The essay shifts from an analysis of AIPAC to an aggressive, almost surgical critique of current Indian-American advocacy.
What's his critique?
Well, he points out that on paper, Indian Americans possess massive structural advantages.
Like what?
They are the highest-earning ethnic group in the country. They possess highly advanced educational credentials. They completely dominate key sectors like tech and medicine, and their demographic numbers are growing rapidly.
So they have all the raw materials of power.
They have all the money and all the talent. But politically, the author argues, they are entirely fragmented and deeply ineffective.
He has a great phrase for this. He says they behave like cultural clubs or charity networks.
Yes.
They organize 1,000 colorful dance performances, Diwali festivals, and cultural parades, but they don't act like a unified civilizational force when it comes to raw political power.
He is offering them a brutally pragmatic playbook to transform from a cultural club into a political juggernaut.
Okay, so what's the playbook?
His first piece of advice is just a harsh reality check. He tells the diaspora they must stop trying to be India-friendly and start being America-relevant.
What's the distinction there?
India-friendly is expecting Washington to care about India just because it is an ancient civilization, or because of its rich spirituality, or simply because it is a growing nation.
Like, hey, we have a great culture, you should like us.
Right. And the author says bluntly, nobody in Washington cares about your ancient heritage.
Ouch.
They only care about American interests. If you want power, you have to prove that America needs India for its own prosperity and global stability. You have to become America relevant.
But to achieve that level of unified messaging, he identifies a massive historical roadblock.
The internal fractures within the diaspora itself.
Right. This seems like the great vulnerability of the Indian community. You have deep historical and religious fault lines. Hindu versus Muslim, North Indian versus South Indian, supporters of the BJP versus supporters of the Congress Party, and these intense, complex debates over the caste system.
It's incredibly complex.
So if a community is historically fractured along 50 different fault lines, how do you actually force them to align on one political narrative?
He warns them that no lobby can survive if it imports the complex, chaotic, multi-party politics of the homeland into the halls of Washington, D.C.
Because D.C. doesn't care.
A senator does not have the time or the desire to understand the nuances of a regional dispute in Uttar Pradesh. To win, the diaspora must overcome all of that internal noise and find a single, boringly consistent, non-negotiable red line.
Just like AIPAC did with the singular issue of Israel's security.
Exactly. They have to flatten their own complexity for the sake of messaging.
So it could be framing India as the indispensable partner against China.
Right. Or a singular focus on U.S.-India strategic tech trade. But whatever it is, they must pick it, agree on it, and repeat it relentlessly without variation for 30 years.
And he doesn't just offer this as vague advice. He actually outlines a very specific architecture to achieve this. He calls it the 4-layer pyramid strategy.
Yes, the blueprint for civilizational power.
Let's go through the layers.
Layer 1 of the pyramid is narrative power. This is establishing the baseline story. He suggests constantly framing India not just as a trading partner, but as the democratic anti-China anchor of the Indo-Pacific.
So every policy discussion must start from the premise that without India, America loses Asia to China.
Exactly.
Layer 2 is institutional power. And this is where he gets deep into the weeds of academia.
He really does.
He says they need to start funding Ivy League chairs and think tanks. I want to pause here because he uses a very specific phrase. He says they need to fight colonial and Orientalist academic narratives. What does that jargon actually mean, and how does it affect lobbying?
It is a critical concept for his strategy. Orientalism generally refers to a Western, often colonial way of depicting Eastern cultures as exotic, backward, superstitious, or inherently oppressive.
Okay.
The author argues that much of the Western academic establishment still views India through this exact colonial lens.
Meaning they focus disproportionately on poverty, caste oppression, or religious conflict, rather than framing India as a complex, rising superpower.
Yes. And why does that matter for lobbying?
Because those Ivy League professors teach the students who become the journalists who write the articles that the senators read.
Precisely. If the academic baseline is negative, if the cultural assumption is that India is oppressive, every policy debate starts at a massive disadvantage. You are always playing defense.
So by funding academic chairs and think tanks, the diaspora can basically fund scholars who rewrite that baseline narrative from the ground up.
It goes right back to elite formation. You are changing the water they swim in.
Which leads perfectly to layer 3, the political pipeline.
The author tells the wealthy diaspora, stop just writing big checks to politicians at fancy fundraising dinners.
Why? Doesn't money buy influence?
He argues that writing a check buys you a photo op. It doesn't buy you policy. Instead, use that wealth to train your youth for staff positions.
Oh, the staffers again?
Because, as the author wisely notes, senators are influenced by staff. A senator might only think about a specific foreign policy issue for 5 minutes a week, but their 26-year-old legislative director thinks about it 60 hours a week.
If you capture the staff culture, you capture the building.
Exactly.
And layer 4 is economic leverage.
Take the massive, unprecedented dominance Indian Americans already possess in the tech industry, in corporate medicine, and in AI development, and weaponize it.
Weaponize it into coordinated industry advocacy.
Yes, make the U.S. economy so reliant on Indian talent and Indian American corporate leadership that pushing anti-India policy becomes economically ruinous for the United States.
To sum up this entire massive structural pivot, the author uses a metaphor that I think is just brilliant.
The sword and the foundry.
Yes, he says that if Indian Americans want to outdo AI Pac, they need to build a foundry instead of a sword.
It is the conceptual difference between a tactical victory and a systemic generational takeover.
Break that down.
A sword is a weapon you use to win a specific battle right now. Spending $10 million to defeat one specific anti-India politician in a local primary, that is swinging a sword.
You might win the battle, but the sword gets dull and you have to fight again tomorrow.
Exactly. But a foundry.
A foundry is the factory that makes the swords.
A foundry is the ecosystem. It is the think tank, the intern pipeline, the academic endowment, the unified narrative. A foundry builds the infrastructure of power.
A sword wins a day. A foundry wins centuries.
The author is begging the diaspora to stop fighting individual reactionary skirmishes and start building the institutional machinery that guarantees they will never be politically powerless again.
It is a literal masterclass in pragmatic organizing. But to actually build that foundry, the author realizes that the diaspora has to make a massive, deeply painful strategic compromise.
They do.
And this is where we bring the two halves of this deep dive, the cosmic prophet and the DC lobbyist, crashing back together.
This is the grand synthesis of the text, and is where the author's terrifying pragmatism reaches its absolute peak.
He introduces this concept of the Dharmic American identity.
Right? He acknowledges a fundamental reality. Indian Americans do not have the built-in Judeo-Christian base that Israel enjoys in the United States.
Which is a huge factor, because Israel has the backing of tens of millions of evangelical Christians in America who inherently support the state of Israel for their own theological, biblical reasons.
These are the massive pre-existing political shield.
But Indian Americans have no such shield. They are a religious and cultural minority.
Therefore, they have to find a completely different door to walk through to gain cultural respect and political cover.
And the author suggests using concepts like yoga, meditation, mindfulness, and ecological thinking as that door.
Because these are elements of dharmic culture that Westerners, particularly affluent, influential Westerners, already love, practice, and respect. It's soft power.
It's totally non-threatening.
Exactly. But here's the critical part. He explicitly warns the diaspora to completely avoid any rhetoric that resembles Hindu supremacy or aggressive religious nationalism. Because he knows that bringing aggressive foreign religious nationalism to Washington would trigger an immediate immune response from American culture, media, and lawmakers.
And this is where the profound, almost tragic irony of this entire worldview reveals itself.
The paradox is staggering. Remember who wrote this?
Right.
This is an author who firmly, literally believes, on a cosmic level, that the Messiah of the Jews, the final incarnation of God on earth, has currently been born as a Hindu.
Right now. On Earth.
He believes he possesses the ultimate unifying secret of the universe. That is his deepest, most profound spiritual truth.
Oh.
But he explicitly states in his political essay that using this Messiah claim in Washington would be absolute political suicide.
Wow.
He writes that framing their lobbying efforts around this aggressive theological truth would provoke a massive, unified backlash from Jews, Christians, the secular media, and the academic establishment.
It would basically destroy the foundry before it was even built. I just want you to imagine the sheer mental discipline required for that. Imagine believing, with every fiber of your being, that you hold the ultimate cosmic truth.
Yeah.
That you know exactly how the 5,000-year cycle of the universe ends. And voluntarily locking that truth in a drawer because you know a 25-year-old staffer on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee will think you are crazy.
He is literally willing to censor his own apocalypse for a seat at the table.
Because he understands the rules of the game better than anyone.
As he writes, politics is not a debate tournament. Politics is narrative war.
He separates his theological reality from his political strategy with absolute ruthless discipline.
He knows that to win influence, you must speak the language of the arena you are fighting in, even if that means leaving your cosmic truth at the door.
Because Washington does not care about cosmic declarations.
No. Washington responds to strategic alignment, economic benefits, and institutional credibility.
It is just a staggering mental balancing act.
It really is.
Let's zoom out a bit and summarize the massive, wildly unpredictable arc we just traveled.
Okay. We started with the concept of God incarnate, breaking down the 5,000-year-old prophecies in the Mahabharata.
Right.
We looked at the exact three-dimensional geometry embedded in classical dance. We explored the philosophical implications of Elon Musk accidentally ending currency to fulfill an ancient holy text.
And from that dizzying, mystical height, we descended straight into the hyper-pragmatic, windowless back rooms of Capitol Hill.
Dissecting how to train 22-year-old congressional staffers and why funding Ivy League think tanks is the absolute key to civilizational survival.
The whiplash is real, but the through line connecting it all is undeniable.
And there is a core takeaway here for you listening to this right now. It doesn't matter what your goal is.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't matter if you are trying to usher in a prophesied age of abundance or if you are just trying to get a new zoning initiative passed at your local city council. True power does not come from having the most philosophically pure arguments.
It certainly doesn't come from having the most righteous anger either. True power comes from building institutions. It comes from finding narrative alignment with your audience, understanding their incentives, and maintaining relentless, boring, unglamorous discipline over decades.
Power is not a sudden event. It is a carefully cultivated ecosystem.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. The author argues, quite convincingly, that politics is downstream of emotion, and emotion is downstream of myth.
It's a powerful statement.
If that is truly how the mechanics of the world work, I want you to take a hard look at the political narratives and the strong opinions you hold today. The ones you argue about online or at the dinner table.
The things you feel most certain about.
Exactly. Are you actually arguing the facts, or are you just caught in the downstream current of someone else's carefully constructed myth?
It's the ultimate diagnostic question. You might think you are looking at a clean, rational X-ray of reality. But you might just be looking at the narrative that a foundry engineered for you to see 20 years ago.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.